to no apologies. In today's vlog, we're going to take a look at another argument for God's existence, which is called the Kalam argument. And the syllogism for this argument goes like this. Whatever begins to exist or exist has to have a cause for its coming into existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has to have had a cause for its coming into existence, God. And we want to take a look at both of these premises to see if they hold water. So the first premise is that whatever begins to exist has to have had a cause for bringing it into existence. Nothing can come into existence on its own power. When something doesn't exist, it's impossible for it to think to itself, I'm going to come into existence, and then to make that happen. Although this is readily accepted in most circles, sometimes you do come across some objections to this premise, like, what if there are some things which we know exist but we're not sure what their cause is? How do we know they didn't just move around from one place to another rather than just coming into existence? That of course begs the question, if it existed already in another place, you still have to answer, how did it come into existence in that place? Or what if science were to discover some things which are continually coming in and out of existence all the time? For example, the electron in some areas of physics. Well, although this is still an area of development, even if it were proved true, it would prove no problem to believers or to the Kalam argument, because the argument doesn't exclude the idea that the Creator is continually creating and sustaining His creation. So the premise still holds true whether you're talking about something that was created seconds ago or something that was created thousands of years ago. Nothing can come into existence on its own power. So the second premise is that the universe began to exist. And here we're just saying that the universe had a beginning. There was a time when the universe didn't exist, and then there was a point when the universe was brought into existence. Now this premise has nothing to do with any particular theory of how exactly creation came about. Was it a Big Bang? Was it a long evolutionary process? Was it a series of bangs and crunches? That really is all irrelevant, because this premise is only asserting that whatever theory you can come up with, that theory had to have a beginning. That being the case, then, we really only have two options. Either yes, the universe began to exist, or no, the universe didn't have a beginning. Matter just has always existed. It's eternal. To address the second option, we need to ask a philosophical question. Can an infinite task ever become completed? And the answer is no, because to complete an infinite task, it would require an infinite amount of steps. But an infinite amount of steps can never be reached or can never be fulfilled. It's infinite. It has no end. It has no beginning. So a task, an infinite task, would never or could never be completed. Now apply this idea to the idea of an infinitely old universe. If it is infinitely old, then an infinite amount of time would have had to have passed before today, this point. But an infinite amount of time, just like an infinite sequence of steps, can never be reached. So either this present day hasn't been reached, or the process of reaching this day wasn't infinite. So obviously we say that the present day has been reached, and therefore the process of getting to today was not infinite. So the first and the second premise do hold true. And if nothing can come into existence on its own, and the universe did begin to exist, well then we conclude that the universe must have been brought into existence by some self-existing, uncreated being, God. Now, does reason support a belief in an eternal being? And the answer is yes. If there ever was a time that God never existed, well then there would have been absolute nothingness. And absolute nothingness can never turn into something. So if there were absolute nothingness, there still would be, at this very point, absolute nothingness. But of course, there are things. And so we say, there can never have been a time when there was absolute nothingness. God, at least, must have always existed. Now, it's also been argued that saying that there is a God or that there is a universe really is the same thing. You either are accepting One, that the universe didn't necessarily begin, it just is, and so we don't need to find a cause for that. Or you just go back one step further and say, God has always existed, and He just is, and so we don't need to find a cause for Him. But it's 6 in one, half a dozen in the other. But I would say that these two things are not the same at all. Firstly, because of what we've just discussed, that it's reasonable to believe in an eternal being, but it's unreasonable to believe in an eternal universe. And secondly, even if we were to grant the idea that the universe didn't begin, the implications of each of these differs greatly. If you just stop at the universe, it places no further obligation on an individual. But if you go just one step further and stop at God, it automatically places all kinds of obligations on us to begin asking questions. What is the Creator like? Why did He create me? What does He expect of me? Some might answer to that, why not then just stop at the universe and not burden myself? And the answer is, because there exist sound and reasonable arguments which point and support to the existence of the Creator. So because these arguments exist, and because this is a matter of such importance, it places a moral obligation on every individual to investigate those claims. Now, besides those points, for the individual who is sincerely uncertain or confused about the existence of God, there really is only one reasonable course of action, and that is Pascal's wager. Where can I place my bet so that in the end, no matter what happens, I always come out a winner, or at least I never come out a loser? Well, if you place your bet with God, even if in the end it turns out He doesn't exist, you never lose. But if you place your bet against God, and it turns out He does exist, then you lose everything: God, eternity, eternal rest. Now, Pascal's wager is not a proof or an argument for God's existence, but it is an incentive to continue the search, to pray the prayer of the skeptic. My God, I don't know whether you exist or not, but if you do, please show me who you are. Thanks for joining me here on No Apologies. Ave Maria.